Welcome back. I'm so happy to have you joining me here today. You are listening to Reverence for Reverie. This is a space where we really honor the slow and the symbolic and the sacred and everything in between. Everything belongs. And today we descend. Not in a spiral of despair, although sometimes that is allowed and we must be there. But actually today it is about the descent into devotion, to depth, to truth, to our becoming, because every rite of passage really begins underground. And so today we're going to turn to myth, because I believe that myth gives shape to what the psyche already knows. And there are few myths that hold more resonance for the psycho-spiritual path than the story of Persephone. I think it is such a powerful myth and evokes such imagery of our own personal journeys. So to kind of recap it, I'm sure many have already heard of the tale of Persephone, but I'll give kind of an overview. So here's how I remember it. Persephone is the daughter of Demeter. She was the maiden of spring. And that really evokes like an innocence, the blooming, untouched by all of the heaviness of the world. And one day, while she's out picking flowers in a field, the earth cracks wide open, and from the depths of hell emerges Hades, god of the underworld. He seized Persephone, kidnaps her, and drags her into the shadows. Now, above ground, Demeter is searching in anguish, and the earth begins to wilt. Crops are withering off. Grief covers the land. But eventually, a deal ends up being struck, and Persephone was allowed to return, but she could only return for part of the year. And this was because she had eaten pomegranate seeds in the underworld, and that had tied her to it forever. So she became a woman of two different worlds. Half of the year she was in bloom in spring, half of the year below ground in the dark. Here's the part that really matters a lot. She did not remain the victim in this story. In time, Persephone rose not as just the captive, but as queen of the underworld. Her descent really became her initiation. The underworld was her realm of wisdom. Psychoanalytically, this myth, for me, speaks to the necessary descent that every one of us must take if we are to grow in wholeness. Jung called this the shadow. So everything that we exile and repress and disown is shoved into the underworld. Donald Winnicott spoke of the true self, which ends up being hidden beneath layers of adaptation. And Thomas Ogden wrote about unformulated experience. This is the parts of ourselves that haven't yet had words, form, or holding. So all of these things that exist in the unconscious realm. And we must descend to meet these parts, not just in theory, but actually in the body. And to do this is to enter the underworld of our own psyche. Again, the unconscious, where grief lives, where rage is pulsing, where dreams will distort and symbols emerge only half formed. It is the dark night of the soul, the threshold, the liminal in-between space, and it is also essential to our full becoming, our full embodiment of self. Because without the descent, there cannot actually be a true becoming. There is no sovereignty, there is certainly no depth, and no coherent field of leadership or of capacity, really. So Persephone really teaches us that the light without the dark is just performance. Spring without winter is completely unsustainable. And our power without a shadow integration is actually very dangerous. In spiritual or entrepreneurial spaces, we often hear about ideas like expansion and ascension and abundance and manifestation, but there are very few who talk about the part before all of that, where everything dissolves, where you actually lose the roles that were once defining you. And that feels like a threat at first. It's disturbing. And where what used to work just stops working. That space, that threshold is the descent that I'm talking about. And it's not a mistake. It does not mean you're failing. It is the actual architecture of your transformation. And for many people, this can really look like letting go of a former identity or brand, leaving a role that brought validation to you, but not actual fulfillment, not nourishment. It might mean facing grief that will no longer allow you to bypass what is real, or encountering fatigue, burnout, or the collapse of overfunctioning. And my goodness, we see that a lot. You don't have to look very far for it. You see, dissent is often misinterpreted as purely regression. And in some ways, it can mean a regression for some period of time. But I don't think that's all it is. If we allow it, if we see it as such, it could actually be a return. This is a return to the soul truth, to what's actually always been inside you, waiting to be claimed. But it was waiting for your presence. It was waiting for you to bring your awareness to it. So in these more symbolic terms, dissent isn't the opposite of rising. It's the precondition to rising. You know, if we don't go into the depths of ourselves, how on earth do we imagine having the capacity to hold more of what life has to offer? We don't have the capacity, we don't have the structure for that then. And I believe that Persephone reminds us that to lead with true sovereignty, autonomy, choice, you must have walked through the darkest corridors of your own underworld. And then you have to crown yourself while you're there. So this is a pretty short episode today. I want to leave you with this. Where in your life are you resisting that descent that might actually be your initiation? What grief, fear, or confusion are you trying to solve too quickly rather than sit with? What underworld territory are you being invited to walk into? And not as punishment, but as preparation for what is about to happen next. Let this be a reminder today that descent is not defeat. It is actually depth. It is reclamation. It can be the prelude to sovereignty and to the abundance and to the capacity of a life that you've been asking for. Thank you so much for walking into the dark with me today. As always, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear how this is landing for you. I always appreciate your subscriptions to this podcast and leaving a review whenever you're able to. I want to remind you that you can also join my email list for more riffs and reflection and reverie from me. It drops straight into your inbox weekly. And all of that will be linked in the show notes for you today. Until next time, may your descent carry you home and may your reverie lead you. Bye for now.